What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Young, bringing you the news here in Taiwan. This year's APEC summit is officially underway. For 2 days, leaders from around the world will be in South Korea discussing some of the Asia-Pacific economy's most pressing issues. Cadence Quaranta has more.
Here in Gyeongju, South Korea, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC summit, has begun. Representatives of 21 economies that make up more than 50% of the global GDP are inside that building. As member economies began their first meeting, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung presented the summit as a way to tackle the, quote, turbulent shifts in the international order that he says are happening right now.
As we face huge change in the free trade order, global economic uncertainty is deepening, and the momentum of trade and investment is weakening. The technical revolution brought on by AI is presenting unprecedented challenges, but also opportunities. While it's going to be a difficult challenge, I believe the answer in overcoming it is in the path that APEC has been on from the beginning.
Over the next 2 days, they're expected to discuss topics like maintaining free trade and improving regional economic integration. In his speech, Chinese President Xi Jinping largely focused on these themes, emphasizing the importance of maintaining an open economic environment in the region, continuing to promote trade and investment, and ensuring stable supply chains. As for Taiwan, the summit presents an opportunity to emphasize its importance on the global stage. APEC is one of the few international organizations it's able to participate in. China objects to its inclusion in most world bodies. And there's been some attention on how Taiwan was presented on Friday. On a broadcast inside the press center, Taiwan's flag was shown on screen as its representative Lin Xin-yi shook hands with Lee before entering the first meeting. That's significant because Taiwan participates in APEC under the name Chinese Taipei, not Taiwan, due to pressure from China. As Taiwan seeks to lower the 20% tariffs the U.S. slapped on the country's goods, Taiwan's top trade negotiator said she met with a U.S. trade official on Thursday on the sidelines of an APEC meeting.
那美国这次出席这个双部长会议啊，是他的副贸易代表 Rick Switzer。你们大家好奇我有没有跟他往来？有，我确实有跟他往来。
Taiwan's APEC delegation says they talked about ways to strengthen U.S.-Taiwan economic and trade relations. They also discussed ongoing trade negotiations, going over their progress. Technical consultations have largely been finalized, the delegation said, with document exchanges underway. And Taiwan's government says the two sides will continue to talk after the APEC summit ends to reach a consensus and ultimately a trade agreement. The head of Taiwan's National Science and Technology Council also met with 3 high-level U.S. diplomats, including the U.S.'s Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and Pacific Affairs. He talked about the importance of Taiwan-U.S. ties for maintaining cross-strait peace and emphasized that Taiwan hoped to work together on AI development and supply chain security. There are sure to be many more significant moments here Friday and Saturday, both inside and outside of these formal APEC meetings, as leaders gather here to discuss some of the regional economy's most pressing issues. The South Korean government also says that member economies are close to reaching a consensus on a joint declaration, so that's something that we'll be watching out for as well. Justin Wu and Cadence Quaranta in Gyeongju, South Korea for TaiwanPlus.
The leaders of Japan and China met on the sidelines of the APEC forum. It's the first time Japan's new Prime Minister, Takaichi, has met with Chinese President Xi Jinping since taking office. Both leaders emphasized the need for constructive and stable ties, but several sources of tension remain. Japan is concerned about China's activities in the East China Sea and its export controls on rare earths. Meanwhile, Takaichi is an outspoken supporter of Taiwan and has called for peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has voiced concerns to his Chinese counterpart about China's activity in several areas, including near Taiwan. Hegseth met Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun in Malaysia 1 day after the Trump-Xi meeting in South Korea. China claims Taiwan and has vowed to take it by force if need be, while the U.S. has been Taiwan's biggest backer and arms supplier. China says the U.S. should be cautious when it comes to Taiwan, but Hegseth says that while the U.S. does not seek conflict, it will defend its interests in the Indo-Pacific. Taiwan's president has overseen the country's new U.S.-made tanks entering service. But with cheap drones now able to take out very expensive tanks, what can Taiwan do to make sure it's getting the most out of its newest weapons? Alan Liu reports.
Here in Hsinchu, the country's first battalion of the Abrams tanks is officially entering service. These U.S.-made tanks are some of the most powerful in the world, and they are expected to give the Army a major boost in firepower and mobility.
现在，我将战备任务与责任交接给你们，请你们务必勤训精练，持续守护国家安全。
The M1A2T Abrams are replacing Taiwan's older fleets of CM11 tanks and mark a significant improvements in Taiwan's arsenal. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te was there to see the new military hardware presented.
新兴单位的成军是全新的挑战，更是展现国军迈向新训练、新思维、新装备、新科技的重要里程碑。
Experts agree that introducing new tanks comes with new challenges. Abrams crews require a lot of training. The vehicles themselves are very expensive, and the war in Ukraine shows that even the most advanced tanks can be taken out by cheap drones.
你必须配备更多的反无人机，比如反无人机的装甲车跟在战车车队后面的，或许这些战甲车队在未来在战场上比较有生存的空间。
Some of Taiwan's fleets of Abrams tanks carry out live fire exercises in July, giving the public a chance to see what its 120mm cannon can do. When paired with a powerful engine and dense modern armor, it's a weapon system the military hopes will give it an edge. Taiwan is expected to receive the final batch of the M1A2T tanks in early 2026, bringing the total number to over 100. For now, the military says all of them will be deployed in northern Taiwan. Fu Huahong and Ellen Lu in Hsinchu, Taiwan for TaiwanPlus.
During October, all three branches of the military held their own training exercises. Our reporter Larry Isiano looks into why the armed forces are holding drills and what it means for the future of Taiwan's defense.
An uncommon sight on Taiwan's roadways. Battle tanks, mechanized infantry, part of 3 defensive exercises in October, just a few months after the military held its Hanguang drills. This year, the longest and largest ever. This week marked the Army's first Lusheng exercises, focused on commanding soldiers in the field effectively and fighting in cities. Watching over the drills was President Lai Ching-te.
透过实兵、实装、自由、统裁、实际对抗的方式，可以验证部队在极端状况下能否 灵活指挥，迅速应变。
On the ground, in the air, and at sea, Taiwan's defensive personnel are training to counter a threat from across the strait. This year, the exercises are broader, more frequent, and reflect concerns about China's increasing military pressure on Taiwan, its daily incursions into the air and waters around the country, and its own large-scale military exercises nearby. In addition to the Lusheng exercises, the Air Force held another round of Tianlong aerial combat training drills for its pilots. And 2 weeks ago, the Navy wrapped up its annual Haichang exercises, practicing for a critical moment in the event of a potential conflict. When does a commonplace incident, like an ADIZ incursion, become something more serious? It's a scenario analysts both in Taiwan and abroad are thinking about.
If you have to get used to this high level of activity, right, you can't live your life in fear, every single day, right? So you start kind of phasing these things out of your mind, not thinking about them. And one of the features of, or what plays to Beijing's strength, is if they can delay the response of Japan, of the United States, to give themselves more time to act, right? So that's what's really dangerous about those things, is that it's lulling us into a complacency about what's normal.
Annual large-scale exercises by China's Navy and Air Force present a similar risk.
It is extremely difficult, if not impossible, for us to avoid being caught by surprise or unprepared, because this is in the human nature. So in a large-scale joint exercise, everything would look like how they would conduct a real invasion or real combat operation. And then we would be dull, we would be desensitized that, okay, they do that all the time.
Drills that emphasize combat readiness, tactical flexibility, and defensive capabilities are the armed forces' answer to these questions. Asymmetric warfare, how a smaller country can use its natural advantages against a much larger force, has become one of the central tenets of military planning under President Lai.
不对称作战与逐次抵抗。各级的指挥官都依据削弱战略的指导构想，灵活运用兵力与火力。
These latest drills, along with new weapons and an increased military budget, all point to a country that is committed to defending itself. But the question now is whether that's enough to keep China at bay. Scott Huang and Larry Ciano for TaiwanPlus.
A month after deadly floods in eastern Taiwan, indigenous farmers who lost their livelihoods are still waiting for government help for their inundated farms. As Irene Lin reports, the damage may be well beyond what money can solve.
会跟他讲说，你要好好的长大哦，我的未来就靠你了。
Treating her crops like her children, Dibus Banai is one of the few farmers restoring upland rice grains endemic to this part of Taiwan and a nutritious ingredient for the local indigenous village Fataan. But everything changed on September 23rd, when a barrier lake in the mountains of Hualien burst, sending 60 million tons of muddy floodwater into her village in Guangfu Township. Years of hard work was washed away in a single day. All that remained of the rarest of the upland rice plants was this small patch of land.
那目前我有2个品种都是透过别人从手上转给我的，它是非常珍贵的，它希望由我这边做承接。经过这5年的富裕，本来讲就在今年度可以有比较大量的种源可以种下去，可是又经过这次的事件，我又要从头开始。
是。
对，目前看到的就是剩下这些。
While most fields in Fataan village are almost completely cleaned up, some in neighboring Tafalong village have been largely neglected, as the damage may not be immediately visible. At first glance, this field of golden grains may seem normal, but if you look closer, there's a thick layer of mud filled with trash and debris covering the roots, suffocating the plants. What was supposed to be the harvest season has now become a source of headaches. Rice farmer Gati Giong said his family has been farming this land for generations, and the disaster this time was far worse than any typhoon damage they ever had to deal with. He said before he could even think about saving the crops or the soil underneath, the most urgent task now is to have professionals remove debris.
这都是包住，它可能里面还有很多的瓶瓶罐罐呐，这些还好处理哦，把它挖掉就好了。 或者是把它清掉，但是它有很多的这些木头的，我们建筑用的板模有没有？还有很多钢筋啊，或者是铁钉之类的。
Officials from the Agriculture Ministry have promised a series of lump sum subsidies, including those for broken down farm equipment and tracts of flooded farmland. Presenting research on improving infertile land, they encourage farmers to try planting in the gray mud, which they said has safe levels of heavy metals but needs a large nutrient boost.
当我们看到这样子的一片花海的时候，我们就相信说，哦，这块土壤已经被改善了。我们现在的土，当然表面的那些杂物要先清除干净，表面的，然后分土层把它打破，不要让它在表面结一层那个不透水层的状态下，是可以把作物种得好的，好，就是大量有机质肥料。 去改良的状态下。
But for farmers like Gati, who are facing heavy debts for their losses, all talks of land restoration comes down to ensuring a stable livelihood.
我们要工作，不是要你们那个几万块、甚至10万，我们不是要这些。我们有工作才有更好的生活条件。我一假定我才领你1万块的补助，我光这些有机质根本都不够。 我们反而为了要这些耕作，我们反而会变得更穷。
With stretches of damaged fields awaiting recovery and bills to pay, the future of these farmers and their indigenous agricultural practices will be hanging in the balance. Devin Tsai, Luffy Lee, Joseph Wu, Alec McDonald, and Irene Lin in Hualien for TaiwanPlus.
And thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, let's take a first look at the Grand Egyptian Museum, set to open soon and showcase the complete treasures of King Tut. I'm Eric Gao. Take care. We'll see you next time.